Israel agrees to begin 4-hour pauses each day in North Gaza to let people flee the fighting. In the meantime, its military operations put a medical complex at risk where thousands of displaced Palestinians are sheltering. The recent 12 months mark the hottest year-long period ever recorded on Earth, a new climate study says. This comes ahead of the COP28 later this month. K-pop could no longer be the K-pop you used to know. Check out foreign groups that are trained under the K-pop producing and training system and how this trend is forming K-pop 4.0. It's November 10th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The Middle East war is where we begin our coverage tonight. Israel agrees to suspend military operations for 4 hours each day and open a new evacuation route from Gaza City for people to find a safer location. In the meantime, the Israel Defense Forces operations put a medical complex in Gaza at risk, where thousands of Palestinians are sheltering. Yoon with the latest.
The White House said Israel has agreed to make daily 4-hour humanitarian pauses in its wartime operations in northern Gaza to enable innocent civilians to find safer locations starting on Thursday local time. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said Israel makes its own decisions, not the U.S., and there will be no military operations in the region during the pause. Each day, the Israeli military will announce its 4-hour pause at least 3 hours in advance, indicating where and when. Kirby noted that Israel will also open a second corridor for civilians heading south, a coastal road connecting to Gaza's main north-south highway. According to an Israeli official on Thursday, after a first corridor was opened several times this week, more than 80,000 people used it to flee northern Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that this was not a ceasefire in Gaza, adding this could only come with the release of all hostages taken by Hamas.
There will be no ceasefire without the release of our hostages. Anything else is futile.
On the same day, Israel Defense Forces spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari uploaded a post on social media saying ground operations were ongoing in the military quarter, the main base of Hamas inside Gaza City. The IDF added that an infantry brigade and armored units entered the zone to destroy Hamas facilities, killing around 50 Hamas members. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said the IDF had developed new ways to enter or destroy tunnels without harming hostages and that the fighting would not be stopped until all the hostages were rescued safely. Israel's military has alleged that Hamas operates a command center at the site of the Dar Al-Shifa Hospital, which includes entrances to its extensive tunnel network, something Hamas and hospital officials have denied. The Director General of Dar Al-Shifa said on Friday that Israel struck a yard in the hospital complex, leaving 4 people wounded. According to the Al Jazeera news agency, he said this led to a lot of casualties, including critical injuries. It could have been a massacre in this place because of the number of people in this complex. He added that everyone in the hospital, including medics and patients, were in a state of fear because of the constant explosions happening near the facility. Yoon, Arirang News.
Leaders of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation are heading to San Francisco to attend this year's event that begins this weekend. What's grabbing attention is a meeting between President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Choi Min-jung covers the broader agenda ahead.
The 2023 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, or APEC, kicks off on Saturday in San Francisco. This year's event is hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden under the theme, Creating a Resilient and Sustainable Future for All. World leaders from 21 member economies, including South Korea, Japan, and possibly China, are expected to take part, although Russia, currently engaged in war with Ukraine, will reportedly not attend. With leaders set to hold discussions next week, all eyes are on whether the leaders of the U.S. and China will hold their own summit talks. Presidents Joe Biden and Xi Jinping last met each other on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali last year. Pundits are hinting at possible signs of improvement to thorny relations caused by trade disputes and an alleged Chinese spy balloon that passed over the U.S. early this year. The meeting between the leaders would follow Washington's recent push to stabilize tense ties, including a series of cabinet-level meetings. Ahead of the APEC summit, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen met with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng on Thursday to limit the economic fallout caused by tensions between Washington and Beijing. Yellen said she seeks open and substantive discussions with China and a healthy economic relationship that benefits both countries over time.
As I said, the United States has no desire to decouple from China. A full separation of our economies would be economically disastrous for both of our countries and for the world.
Her Chinese counterpart in response said Beijing is also seeking effective measures to improve their economic and trade relations. Meanwhile, also taking place next week is the APEC CEO Summit, bringing CEOs and entrepreneurs together for dialogue on global opportunities and challenges that are shaping economic, environmental, and societal trends in the region. The 21-member economies are home to around 3 billion people and represent approximately 62% of world GDP and half of the world's trade. Choi Min-dong, Arirang News.
South Korea has decided to provide $300,000 worth of humanitarian aid to Nepal following last week's deadly earthquake. Announcing the plan, Seoul's foreign ministry said Friday that the government hopes to support the people of Nepal who have suffered damage from the earthquake and help them quickly resettled. At least 150 people have been killed and over 300 injured after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck remote western Nepal last Friday. Scientists worldwide say 2023 is set to be the warmest year in recorded history. This is creating a greater sense of urgency for climate action leading up to COP28, which will be held later this month in the United Arab Emirates. Chung Eun-ju has more.
Climate scientists from the European Union said Wednesday that 2023 is on track to be the planet's warmest year in recorded history. According to the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service, or C3S, last month was the hottest October on record and 1.7 degrees Celsius warmer than average temperatures for the same month in pre-industrial times. C3S Deputy Director Samantha Burgess described the October temperature anomaly as very extreme.
When we combine our data with the IPCC, then we can say that this is the warmest year for the last 125,000 years.
The heat is a result of greenhouse gas emissions combined with the emergence this year of the El Niño weather pattern, which warms surface water in the eastern Pacific Ocean. According to C3S, the global average temperature from January to October this year was the highest on record. The previous record was 2016, another El Niño year. Climate Central, a non-profit science research group, also reported that the last 12 months were the hottest ever recorded on Earth. Over the course of the year, 7.3 billion people, or 90% of humanity, reportedly endured at least 10 days of high temperatures that were at least 3 times more likely because of climate change. Burgess emphasized the pressing need for urgent and ambitious climate action leading up to the COP28 Climate Summit. COP28 is the 28th annual United Nations climate meeting where governments will discuss how to limit and prepare for future climate change. The summit is being held in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, from November 30th until December 12th. COP28 aims to keep alive the goal of limiting long-term global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was agreed by nearly 200 countries in Paris in 2015. Additionally, COP28 will concentrate on quickly moving to clean energy sources, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions before 2030, delivering money for climate action from richer to poorer countries, and working on a new deal for developing nations. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
The UAE considered South Korea as a partner for economic cooperation like in the green industries. This is according to the UAE Economy Minister as he sat down with our correspondent Lee Soo-jin here in the South Korean capital to talk about current and future business opportunities.
The United Arab Emirates sees South Korea's green industries such as agri-tech as viable areas for future cooperation. Talking to Arirang News on Thursday, UAE Minister of Economy Abdullah bin Tuq Al-Mahri said that Seoul-Abu Dhabi economic ties have progressed to an unprecedented level. In October, South Korea and the UAE concluded talks to sign a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, a bilateral free trade deal that is Seoul's first with a Middle Eastern nation.
I think on the levels of government to government, all the agreements has been signed or to be signed and to be ratified. I think it's the time for business to business to find business opportunities.
What kind of business opportunities and incentives can the UAE provide to South Korean companies looking to enter the market?
So the UAE had a huge change in the economic legislations in the last 2 years. One which was very important is we gave 100% ownership for any company who wants to come in mainland. In the previous legislation, we had the 51 local partner, 49 foreign partner. We've seen 1,100 Korean companies already established in the UAE, and we're hoping to go see more there.
In a bid to boost global investment, the UAE amended a law to allow foreign entrepreneurs to set up businesses in the UAE without local shareholders' involvement. He said the UAE is interested in doing more business with South Korean companies in green industries as part of efforts to secure a sustainable economic future.
I think the agriculture and food security is a very important one. We launched as well very recently, 2 days ago, our cluster on agri-tech economy, and I think that's an opportunity where we are looking out to work together with Korea.
Minister Al-Mahri, during talks with his counterpart at the Ministry of SMEs and Startups on Wednesday, discussed South Korean companies participating in industrial clusters in the UAE. The minister said that in the future, the UAE can also provide South Korean companies with opportunities to scale up and also serve as a gateway for them to enter other markets.
Now, with the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, we signed one with Korea. We signed about 7 and 8 and more coming in the pipeline. These will open opportunities as well to look how to establish in the UAE and utilize the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with other countries to access other markets.
He added that the current economic ties between South Korea and the UAE are like that of brother and sister, and that Seoul has companies with cutting-edge technologies that Abu Dhabi plans to not only partner with but also learn from. 이수진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Following the opposition-controlled National Assembly's approval of contentious bills yesterday, including the pro-labor yellow envelope bill, unionized workers will hold a mass rally this Saturday to demand its swift implementation. In the meantime, the nation's prime minister calls the passage regrettable. Lee Shi-hu reports.
Around 140,000 unionized workers are expected to come out to the streets this Saturday to demand the swift promulgation and implementation of the so-called Yellow Envelope Bill approved by the opposition-controlled National Assembly on Thursday. The members of the Federation of Korean Trade Unions and the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions will come from around the country to gather in Seoul to hold separate demonstrations. They're demanding President Yoon Suk-yeol to not exercise his right to veto the Democratic Party-led revision to the Trade Union and Labor Relations Adjustment Act approved by the opposition at the Assembly following the ruling People Power Party's walkout. The revision guarantees bargaining rights for indirectly employed workers and prohibits damage lawsuits being brought against striking workers. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said on Friday that the unilateral passing of contentious bills is regrettable.
It is really frustrating and regrettable that agendas that deepen social conflict that are far from the people's livelihoods are handled without sufficient deliberation. This is unfortunate. The government will collect opinions from all walks of life on the problems and side effects of the bill passed this time and examine in depth the direction for the national interest.
Prime Minister Han further called for the Assembly's support in helping the administration focus on an agenda that deals with the people's livelihoods. Amid the possibility of a presidential veto of the Yellow Envelope bill, Chief Presidential Secretary Kim Dae-gi said the legislation hasn't yet been transferred to the administration. When this happens, it will consider many opinions, Kim said, responding to DP's related question at the Assembly on Friday. The PPP said on Friday that it will suggest a presidential veto. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
In efforts to revitalize South Korea's agricultural industry, President Yoon Suk-yeol vows to transform the industry into a high-paying occupation through digitalization and the use of artificial intelligence. The president attended a Farmers' Day ceremony on Friday, a day that is normally celebrated on November 11th. There, he said Middle Eastern countries have been trying to work with South Korea's smart farm technology and requested that farmers here in the country pay great attention to the technology. He also cited the government's 2024 budget proposal, saying that it's looking to increase the budget for farms in need of support to recover from natural disasters. For 3 months in a row up to October, there has been a net outflow of foreign investment from South Korea. Data from the Bank of Korea released on Friday shows that offshore investors last month sold around $2.8 billion worth of listed stocks and bonds. This marks the largest net outflow since April of last year. It is also the third consecutive month that foreign investors have been net sellers of Korean stocks. A bank official says foreigners' net stock selling came amid risk aversion triggered by the Israel-Hamas conflict. South Korea's Booker Prize winning author Kang has won the French Prix Médicis Award, this time for foreign literature, with her novel I Do Not Bid Farewell. She's the first Korean author to win this award. Lee Seung-jae has details.
Famed South Korean author Kang won a prestigious French literary award on Thursday for her 2021 novel I Do Not Bid Farewell. Her novel was chosen as the winner of the Prix Médicis Award for Foreign Literature. The Prix Médicis Award, founded in 1958, is considered one of the top literary awards honoring fictional work in France. In 1970, the foreign literature category was added to award books published in translation. Published 5 years after Han won the International Booker Prize for The Vegetarian, her latest award-winning novel describes the events surrounding the April 3, 1948 incident on South Korea's Jeju Island from the perspective of 3 women. The government of the day suppressed civilian protests against U.S. military rule, leading to the deaths of up to 30,000 people. The French edition of the novel was published in August. Han was shortlisted for the award in October and becomes the first Korean author to have won this award. She was previously nominated for Prix Médicis in 2017 for her 2011 novel Greek Lessons. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A couple of concerts are being held here in Seoul this weekend where the audience can enjoy the beauty of both Korean and Taiwanese traditional music. Musicians from the 2 countries will put on traditional music performances dubbed Hwaibudong from this Friday to Saturday at South Korea's National Gugak Center's Yeakdang Hall. The title Hwaibudong is an idiom meaning pursuance of harmony while respecting differences. Friday's concert is a joint performance of Korean and Taiwanese artists, and on Saturday, musicians from Taiwanese National Center for Traditional Arts will be on stage performing orchestral music. Friday's joint concert is being hosted for the first time in 4 years since the COVID-19 pandemic. It's time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent, Song Yujin, in the studio. Welcome, Yujin.
Great to be here, Jungmin.
Great to have you here. What do you have for us today?
So, Jungmin, guess what? I am back with K-pop again for 2 straight weeks. So while covering K-pop stories for the past 2 weeks, it really made me feel that watching K-pop evolve is really fascinating. And what I mean by this is that we're now used to seeing K-pop groups with members who aren't Koreans, but what about other groups that mirror the K-pop style? Well, I had the chance to speak with one such girl group. Let's first take a look.
Hi, we are Sarvi. Get ready! 언가 그룹입니다.
Starby made their debut 4 years ago. However, they came to Korea this August as trainees. They were chosen for the Grow Together project by the Korean Foundation for International Cultural Exchange, which offers emerging overseas artists the opportunity to train in Korea. Over the last 4 months, these girls underwent the rigorous training that K-pop trainees go through, with hours of vocal lessons and dance classes every day.
In Korea, usually they have like a longer time session for the training, and they gave us a lot of time to practice by ourselves. In Indonesia, we always practice with the teacher, so like it's like a different method where Korea makes you like grow and learn from yourself, and it like.
Starby represents the new era in K-pop, dubbed as K-pop 4.0. The initial era involved tailoring Korean artists to match the trends in other countries, such as BoA's success in Japan during the early 2000s. This transitioned into the second stage, integrating non-Korean members into K-pop groups, followed by the third stage, featuring groups entirely comprised of non-Korean members. Now, K-pop is exporting its training system.
The K-pop nurturing system has reached a significant milestone. Entertainment companies have implemented this system for K-pop groups, and witnessing their global success has sparked a growing interest in extending this system internationally.
According to Park Chang-woo, the head of the management agency that trains Starby, this model is pivotal for K-pop's sustained global influence.
Adapting K-pop to suit each country and spreading its training and management system can open up new opportunities for the K-pop industry. Overseas fans will feel a stronger sense of familiarity with the artists too.
Having finished their months-long training, Starby is now going back to Indonesia. Drawing from their experiences in Korea, this is their vision.
We are trying to follow the trend that's happening now, that people like the Korean K-pop groups that have a very unique genre and a very unique concept in itself. But we try to mix it up with our own nationally like Indonesian trends and also Indonesian costume like we wore today.
K-pop's fusion with diverse cultures is one way that could ensure its enduring impact on the global stage.
You know what? K-pop really come a long way. It's exporting its training system right now. And Eugene, last time you were talking about the surge of English lyrics in K-pop. So what language are Starby's songs in?
Well, Jongmi, I want to point out that just like I mentioned in my report, and when you first saw how Starby introduced themselves, they are not a K-pop group. So Starby is an Indonesian girl group who went through K-pop training. So their songs aren't in Korean. Their lyrics are either in Indonesian or English. But to link this back to the point I made last week, this kind of shows that more artists around the world are incorporating English lyrics in their songs so that they all want to reach a wider audience.
Our culture correspondent, Song Yujin, thank you for your great report.
Thank you.
Early winter-like conditions are in the forecast this weekend. Morning temperatures will be in minus figures for the first time this season, at -2 degrees tomorrow and -3 on Sunday. Sensible temperatures will be much lower, so make sure to bundle up extra warm. Colder spells are expected later tonight across some inland regions. From 9 p.m. tonight, eastern parts of the country and the surrounding regions will have cold wave advisories issued. In the meantime, gusty winds are expected for the coastlines of Jeollado provinces as well, with strong wind advisories in place. For these regions, winds will be gusting as fast as 20 meters per second. With lows plummeting significantly overnight, frost and ice may appear on the roads. For those out and about early tomorrow, make sure to take extra precautions out on the roads. Tomorrow, Seoul will be starting off at -2 degrees. Daejeon and Chuncheon at -3 degrees Celsius. Highs in Seoul will get up to 7 degrees. Gwangju 10, Busan will be topping out at 16 degrees. Until next Monday, morning temperatures will be staying in the negative territory. It's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
I'm live. 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
Stories on site. From Korea to the world, and from the world to Korea. We ask questions every day that could change the world. Taking news a step further, Arirang News. You're watching Arirang News. You're watching Arirang.
That's a very interesting.
Keeping close tabs on you.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
Hello everyone, it's Friday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. A two-way street. This is how Washington's Secretary of State Antony Blinken described strengthened ties between North Korea and Russia. Such words came from a joint press conference after having talks with South Korea's top diplomat Park Jin, where they stressed the need to together intensify pressure on Moscow regarding its military technology transfer. Blinken visited South Korea after having stayed in Japan for G7 foreign ministerial meetings, and now he's in India, showing Washington's intense focus on the Indo-Pacific region. How did experts see Blinken's visit to Seoul, and what are the recent updates on North Korea? For this, we invited Dr. Go Myung-hyun, Senior Fellow from Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome, Dr. Go.
Great to be here.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Bruce Klinger, a Senior Research Fellow from the Heritage Foundation. Good to see you again, Mr. Klinger.
Well, thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being with us. All right, first question to our Dr. Go. So, like I said before, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Japan, South Korea, and now he's in India. And experts say that this demonstrates that the United States is quite focusing on Indo-Pacific region. Why is this?
Well, there's some concern right now that the United States' attention has been too divided. So there are already two wars going on. One in Ukraine, obviously, since 2022, and there's a new war that just broke out in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. And so there's a concern, a growing concern in Washington and elsewhere that there could be potentially another conflict zone opening up in Asia. We know that there's always a latent tension between China and the United States regarding Taiwan, as well as the South China Sea. And we know that China and the Philippines have been suffering from friction regarding the maritime borders in South China Sea. So that could escalate out of control and lead to some sort of a conflict. So there are all these concerns, and I think there are criticisms in Washington that the Biden administration has been focusing too much in Ukraine. We know that the Biden administration had to defend itself against growing domestic criticism against the ever-increasing expenditure to assist Ukraine. So, for instance, the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives, is very opposed to the idea of furthering assistance to Ukraine at the moment. So I think this is the reason why the Secretary Blinken is doing the tour of the Asian countries and Asian allies to demonstrate that the U.S. commitment. But then at the same time, what really matters is not so much the war, so where he's visiting, but actually the capabilities of the United States military. And we know it's split. There are sizable number of U.S. deployment taking place right now in the Middle East, and these are far away from Asia. So this is a very precarious moment, I would say, for the United States and its allies.
Right, I see. So basically, Washington is trying to manage and control the situation in Asia as well. Right, I see. Now, Mr. Klinger, let's turn our eyes to Blinken's trip to Seoul. So it was his first under the Yoon administration. What significance does this have?
During the past 2 years, there have been extensive numbers of meetings between U.S. and South Korean officials, foreign affairs, defense, national security, et cetera, as well as trilateral meetings with Japan. So this is a continuation of that trend where the U.S. and Seoul are coordinating their policies, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. but also it comes at a time of great concern of what the crisis in the Middle East, as well as the ongoing crisis with Ukraine. So the U.S. wants to coordinate with its very important ally, not only on Indo-Pacific issues, but also throughout the world. And that really reflects the importance that South Korea has, not only with the United States, but also on the global stage.
All right, I see your point. Now, delving a little bit deeper into what Blinken said during the talks with his counterpart, Park Jin, he pointed out that Russia is providing technology and support for North Korea's military programs, and he reportedly discussed ways to intensify pressure on Moscow with South Korea. But how can it be done?
Well, clearly there are concerns that the Russians are paying North Korea with technology and other types of know-how and support in exchange for North Korea's assistance with especially with the artillery shells that Russia will probably use against Ukraine. We believe that the North Koreans have supplied up to 500,000 shells of the 152mm caliber. And this could make a significant difference in the battlefield in Ukraine. And so, but that's for Ukraine, and for the Korean side, the concern is that Russia might be supplying some of the cutting-edge technologies that North Korea might very much in need, for instance, to perfect ballistic missile technology, as well as the military satellite technology. So, and then the Secretary Blinken has indicated that this exchange has already taken place. So it's really a matter of a willingness on the part of South Korea to work with the allies to put pressure on Russia. And in fact, South Korea has a huge leverage over Russia. Russia is in a very vulnerable state right now. It's very exposed in Ukraine. The war there is not going well. And then really, if South Korea could help Ukraine directly with military assistance, it could make a fundamental difference in the battleground. For instance, I just mentioned that North Korea might have supplied up to 500,000 shells of 152mm caliber. South Korea, in fact, has in storage, it's a smaller caliber shell, but 2 million shells of 105mm. So one can speculate that South Korea also has in its possession a similar quantity of 155mm caliber, which is quite similar to the one that North Korea supplied to the Russians. So if South Korea can just supply half of that, which will be 1 million, could really push back the Russians in Ukraine. So I think the Russians are very aware of this possibility that South Korea is basically an arsenal of democracy that the United States doesn't have right now. And if South Korea changes its mind about lending direct military assistance to Ukraine, it could make a fundamental difference and really affect not just Russia's standing in the battleground, but also Putin's political standing domestically. So I think this is something that South Korea should definitely consider now that we are facing evidence of Russia having supplied key technologies to North Korea.
All right, interesting. Well, Mr. Clare, the two top diplomats further highlighted the importance of China's constructive role against North Korea getting closer to Moscow, while saying it will not serve China's interests if their bilateral ties get stronger. But what do such words suggest?
Well, it's a bit of wishful thinking. China could play a constructive role in issues related to North Korea, but it has rarely done so. It has often been obstructionist, particularly in the last year or so, when it comes to the UN Security Council. In the past, it was willing to allow incrementally stronger UN resolutions in response to North Korean violations. But then it often turned a blind eye or actively engaged in violations of those UN resolutions. But the last year or so, particularly since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, both Moscow and Beijing have been even more obstructionist in the UN Security Council. So Seoul and Washington, as well as other nations, repeatedly implore Beijing to play a more constructive role to try to get North Korea in compliance with numerous UN resolutions. But it has not really been happening, particularly in the recent years.
Right, I see. So, Mr. Klinger, you think that China will again turn a blind eye, even if the relationship between North Korea and Russia strengthens even more, right?
Exactly.
All right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, this is last question on Blinken's visit to Seoul. And both sides agreed to step up extended deterrence measures against North Korea. And this actually comes after a report saying that the U.S. deployed more strategic assets than ever this year. What further measures could be implemented to step up this deterrence?
So yes, exactly. So the United States has already deployed the nuclear submarine, and then it actually deployed the B-52H strategic bomber, which is nuclear capable. And lately, the last event, action, was the test of the ICBM, the Minuteman III, which failed. But nonetheless, it's really about demonstrating U.S. assurance and the deterrence capabilities against North Korea and what else. But then this is actually forms these three types of military means, weapon systems. These are the so-called nuclear triad: the nuclear submarine, nuclear bomber, as well as the nuclear-tipped intercontinental ballistic missile. So in terms of weapon systems that the United States has in place right now, it has shown them all. So what else could be done at this juncture is more measures, such as, but more of a software rather than hardware. So we already have a framework for nuclear consultation group, the NCG, which is an assurance mechanism as well as a deterrence mechanism. And the two countries could add more flesh to this framework. For instance, the NCG, through the Ocean Declaration this year, both sides have agreed to conduct tabletop exercises. So even though tabletop exercises sounds like an exercise, in fact, could be very informative. It really depends on the level of details. So, for instance, the United States could share with South Korea more detailed scenarios on how the United States will respond with nuclear weapons in case of a North Korea's nuclear threat, or nuclear attack, sorry, not just threat, but nuclear attack, or not. And then South Korea could better prepare itself for such contingencies. And in addition, South Korea and the United States could conduct joint military exercises, just like the ones that we are having right now, such as the Ulchi Freedom Shield, but then add a nuclear component to it. So these are less visible measures, but in terms of substance, makes a fundamental difference in my view. So it's something that many of us experts have been expecting. For instance, ASEAN Institute, where I work, we recently released a report that outlines this kind of further assurance measures for South Korea that involves nuclear component. So I think there's a lot to be done, and then that can be done.
All right, I see. Well, Mr. Klinger, now turning our eyes to defense chiefs meeting. So defense chiefs of South Korea, U.S. and Japan could hold a meeting before next week's security consultative meeting, which will be the first standalone defense ministerial meeting between the three countries. And one of the main agenda items is reported to be over details of our real-time missile data sharing system. But what would this mean?
Well, it's part of a trend of improving not only bilateral defense cooperation between the U.S. and South Korea with the resumption of large-scale bilateral military exercises last year and then continuing throughout this year, but it's also the continuation of the improvement of trilateral security cooperation. We saw that the three countries resume their military exercises last year. Predominantly anti-submarine warfare and missile defense. And then late last year, the leaders of the three countries pledged to exchange in real time missile launch information from North Korea. It's a long overdue development, and one would have hoped that had been ongoing for some time. But and then when we saw with the Camp David summit that there was sort of a further pledge to implement that strategy, and in discussions with officials, it does seem like it's getting very close to implementation, if not already done so. It's in all of our benefit to have the best information on North Korean missile launch information so that the three nations can best implement their own missile defenses against not only short-range, but also medium and intermediate-range North Korean missiles.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, staying on trilateral cooperation, South Korea, U.S. and Japan agreed to launch a high-level cyber consultation group as a follow-up measure to an agreement which was reached during the Camp David summit. But why is it so important to block North Korea's cyber attacks, and what do you expect this group to do?
Well, for instance, South Korea and the United States have already agreed to upgrade the level of cybersecurity cooperation to one of similar to the conventional alliance that we have already. So it's called the Strategic Cybersecurity Cooperation Framework. So that promises to really intensify the level of cooperation, for instance, by conducting not just joint exercises, but also joint operations. So if Japan could be added to such a framework, then clearly there's going to be a lot of synergies. So we have to understand that North Korea doesn't really limit its attacks to South Korea only. It's pretty much the North Korea's reach is global, and Japan has a very similar cybersecurity postures like South Korea, which is in fact very defensive in nature. So the hope, I think, on the part of Washington is by linking South Korea's cyber defenses with Japanese, the two sides could in fact have more synergy, obviously, but also have a more of a proactive stance against South Korea's cyber threats. So there's that aspect also, but also what you just mentioned about preventing North Korea's cyber theft. South Korea is one of the, even despite its a sizable economy, but in proportion to its economic size, there's a disproportionate interest in cryptocurrencies. There are many cryptocurrency exchanges in South Korea, and in fact, the situation is very similar in Japan. So, Japanese cryptocurrency exchanges have been vulnerable to North Korean attacks. So, I think there's that understanding too. And finally, I think when it comes to cryptocurrency exchanges and theft, the missing link here is in fact how the North Koreans can monetize the stolen cryptocurrencies. And the presence of sizable presence of Japanese Koreans in Japan who are friendly towards North Korea could constitute this link where North Korea could monetize their stolen cryptocurrencies into cash and then basically conduct money laundering in Japan and transfer the cash to North Korea. So for that reason alone, the Japan is a very important link or like a component in a regional cybersecurity defense system.
So that's how North Korea gets the money to, develop the weapons and all those systems, right?
That's what we suspect.
All right,
Yeah.
I see. Well, Mr. Clare, let's also talk about the latest news in North Korea. So North Korea has designated November 18th as Missile Industry Day to commemorate the successful test launch of the regime's Hwasong-17 ICBM last year. What is intended by such a designation, and is this the first time Pyongyang has done something like this?
I believe so. They didn't do so back in 2017 when North Korea launched its first ICBMs, the Hwasong 14 and 15. So here they're really affirming the importance of the ICBMs to North Korea's deterrence and defense strategy. And it also gives us another anniversary to be on the lookout for more missile launches. So in the last year or so, North Korea has really highlighted the ICBMs. It issued a new nuclear law a year ago where it lowered the threshold for its use of nuclear weapons, including on ICBMs. And then this year it codified that law in a revision to its constitution. So many of us are expecting or will be looking for another attempted launch of North Korea's military reconnaissance satellite. They've tried twice and it failed, and perhaps they'll try again on November 18th. Or there may be another launch of a ICBM, whether it's the Hwasong-17 or the 18, which is a solid fuel ICBM. So it certainly is affirming the importance of nuclear weapons and missiles, and also perhaps will be an indicator of when they may do the next launch of a large missile, whether it's the reconnaissance satellite or another ICBM launch.
Right, I see. Dr. Go, what's your view on this? The Joint Chiefs of Staff also said that it is highly likely that North Korea would launch another military satellite, right?
Yeah, so, well, in fact, it's kind of delayed already. North Korea had announced that they would, in fact, carry out this third launch attempt of their space vehicle with the military reconnaissance satellite last month in October. So launching it in November makes sense. So it gives more time to North Korean technicians to perfect the launch, the odds of a successful launch, and if maybe they can really iron out any last-minute wrinkles in their the process of launching the space vehicle. So, and also there could be additional help from Russia. We suspect that Russians are not going to send their personnel, scientists, to technicians to help North Koreans because too visible and too provocative. But then it could be happening. So all these elements combined indicate that the North Koreans' odds of a successful launch is probably higher than the last 2 times. But also the adage says the third time is a charm. So maybe North Koreans are betting on that too.
All right, I see your point, Dr. Go. Well, Mr. Klinger, meanwhile, North Korea shut down several diplomatic missions, including its embassies in Spain, Italy, and some countries on the African continent. And some say this is due to economic difficulties and that there could be further shutdowns. What is your view on this?
It's really a puzzling development. It would seem counterproductive for North Korea to shut these embassies. And it only has, I believe, 50 overseas, and so cutting 5 is a very large percentage of those. So closing the embassies, it constrains North Korea's ability to get its side of the story out or its messaging. And also the embassies have served as a base for illicit activities. But we also know that in the past, for really a long period of time, the embassies have had to be self-sufficient in their funding. They've had to generate funding for their own operations, and they often used illicit activities to fund that. So if the embassies are closing, it could show that not only were they not able to generate funding for their own operations, but that it does show that the North Korean economy is perhaps even worse than we've assessed. And so we may see this to be a going trend that other embassies will close. It could also be a reflection of international efforts to combat North Korean illicit activities, not only cyber activity, but other illicit activities. So it's certainly, I think, a reflection of North Korea's poor economic status right now.
All right, I see your point. But Dr. Go, the National Intelligence Service said that there have been signs of North Korea pushing for a new consulate. And many say it could perhaps be established in a country that is Russia-friendly. What's your view on this?
So probably likely. So I mean, really, I think where North Korea is going to establish a new diplomatic site is going to be very interesting. I think it's going to prove or disprove all these theories that we have to explain why North Korea is doing this. Just like many has pointed out, it's not so productive for North Korea to cut down on their diplomatic presence in the third world, especially when it has a long history behind it. And in fact, North Korea have been pretty successful in help, especially in the third world countries, to raise its public profile. North Korea has, in fact, has a more active diplomatic presence in those countries. So in that sense, cutting down on their diplomatic presence in those countries, overall in the long run, it could be counterproductive. But if North Korea is considering the idea of opening up a new diplomatic site in a Russian-friendly territory or country, it could be an indication that North Koreans are essentially trying to focus their diplomatic efforts in countries that matter to them strategically rather than in diplomatic terms or politically, strategically or economically. So if that's indeed the case, then I think North Korea is showing that it's really following their own statements about North Korea being one of the three axes, Russia, China, and North Korea that form this authoritarian bloc. So I think it's very, very probable, and then if that's indeed the case, North Korea might establish a new diplomatic site in, say, in Central Asian countries that are friendly to Russia, and also presents a lot of economic opportunities.
All right, I see your point, Dr. Go. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Dr. Go, as usual, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And Mr. Klinger, thank you for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all from Within the Frame tonight. We'll be next Monday with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the weekend, and goodbye.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.